Good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome, Sir Howard Davies. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And it's a honor also for ESSEC to have such a diverse audience. We are more or less in the type of interaction of the traditional conférence de rédaction du journal Le Monde. The chief redaction conference every morning in Le Monde is standing up. Because as soon as you are standing up, you are sure that people will not sleep, especially after lunch, and people will not last too long, which is good for you. So I will try to do both. I think that having a title which is Finance, Economics and Politics Together for a Better Tomorrow is pretty appropriate in these times. And I'm saying that for a number of reasons. And I will summarize my small introductory remarks by 6 different reasons where you were right to choose this title. I don't know if you remember the Greek. Crisis in Greek is not anxiogenious. It doesn't deliver anxiety. Crisis is just transition. Momentum of transition from one stage to another. And I think that in the very Greek sense, we are in a crisis, which is always an interesting moment, isn't it? 6 items around the crisis. The first has been the financial and economic crisis. Crisis of liquidity, credit crunch, crisis of economic deficit, crisis of sovereign debt, and at the end, crisis of the Eurozone. And the last part of these items, which is of course highly connected with the huge deficit that many governments, including my governments, have created during the last years in order to fuel an economy with near zero growth or really zero growth today, is also something which is looked at from other regions of the world, and especially in Asia, as with a lot of skepticism, and with a lot of question mark around the kind of self-centric attitude that this could mean for Europe. The second point of crisis, in the sense of transition, is a geopolitical crisis. The moment of this crisis has been the moment where we saw on the scene the G7, or 7+1, G8, transforming in G20. And this movement is huge. The various key meetings of G20 who have taken place since 2008 have been amazing moments of transformation of leadership in the entire world. And within this movement, of course, we can quote the rising of Asia, and I will say of Asias with an S, because there is not one Asia, there are several. There are several zones, there are several regions, and if you are in Asia, which I have the chance to be once a month, because we have a campus in Singapore, so I'm here once a month, you can really understand why and how Asia is so diverse. What the Asia people from the region, are today living as the Asian Renaissance, is a moment which is in some areas in some places of the area lived as a form of revenge. Because in some of these countries in their collective mindset, in their storytelling, are considering that they have been leaders of the world for years and for centuries. And just the last 2 centuries was a strange parenthesis compared to what was happening in the arts, in the literature, in the poetry, and so on and so forth, for the 1 millennium before. So the form of representation that we have as Westerners, as Asia is coming out, Asia is rising, or the perception that the people in this region have is very different. In this geopolitical movement, the vast move towards urbanization, with all the social challenges which are linked to that, the vast move towards increasing level of inequality, and you know about the Gini coefficient and all that stuff, are raising a key question which is, and it's a question which is both raised in these areas and which is raised also in Europe, not really in the United States, but in Europe definitively yes, is how liberal economy is the most appropriate way to organize the relation between economy and society. It's a very, very basic question. And it's a basic question which has been sharpened through the greediness of some behaviors, which has been sharpened through the short-termism of some behaviors. But today, the political legitimacy of liberal economy is at stake in many countries, including probably at one of the most extreme regimes here in France. The third point, which is among the crises as a transition, is a form of a paradox. Never in the history the companies have been so powerful than today. Today, as you know, more than 50% of the 100 largest organizations by their budget are companies. They are not states. They are companies. And they are companies working for the good of the companies. So what is the aim of these companies, who are much larger in many cases than the majority of the states, economically speaking? This is a key question about what is the goal of the private companies today. And why it is a key question? For a very simple reason, which is that 50 years ago, 50 years ago, what was public good and what was private good was pretty clear. Today, it's no more clear. And something which is clear is how businesses are today involved in what historically had been called public good. If you take energy, if you take water, if you take education, if you take health delivery, all that have a deep component with public good. Today, in most of the cases, these public goods are delivered through private companies. Let me quote an example which is a little bit hard, so I apologize by advance if I am a little bit shocking, but it is in terms of political paradigm that I cite this event. Do you know what has been the most creative innovation of the Iraq war? It's something which is very simple. It is just privatization of military services. In year 2010, some of my friends who are multi-star generals in the French army sent to me saying that they have just discovered that since a few months, it was possible to buy cash, to buy air bombing services. That's interesting. Because if, as a company, you have invested in your capacity to deliver this very advanced service, you want a return on your investment, right? That is basic economics. In every business school, you learn that you want a return on investment. And today, you have private companies with a nice level of equity, a nice level of brand power within New York Stock Exchange and so on, who are just delivering air bombing services. What I want to mention in this extreme case is that the difference between what is today private good and the public good and the way to deliver public good has completely been changed. Also, you have today in some areas, especially in biotechnology or in IT, the most advanced places of research, which means creation of thoughts, not of technology, creation of thoughts. In some disciplines, the creation of thoughts is the most advanced places of creation of thoughts are within private companies. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So I think that this is extremely important because the regulation of these giants who have the power to deliver public good services, soft or very hard public good services, or the regulation of places which are among the most advanced places to create thoughts is yet to be invented. And it is yet to be invented mainly because we have very poor yardstick of performance measurement of the companies. I will return to that at the end. So this is what the third point. The fourth point of this transition, which can use to crisis, is worldwide scarcity of talents. This is good news for you. This is very good news. There is a worldwide scarcity of talent because in every place, the real talents, the people who are able to be very sharp in one particular area, but who are also able to embrace the complexity, because the reality is complexity, are pretty scarce. And this scarcity has a consequence, which is the rising level of salaries of the talents. And this consequence has a second consequence, which is more sad, which is, statistically speaking, and I am very cautious to say so, statistically speaking, in advanced democracy, public offices, and especially politician offices, are less and less competitive in terms of payment and less desirable in terms of total recognition than what they were 30 years ago. And this will be my fifth point, which is the crisis of democracy. I am saying that with a lot of precautions and cautiousness because you are a diverse audience. And as a Frenchman, I am receiving you here, but I am raising this point because of the title of your seminar. I think there are many reasons for crisis of democracy. The fact that there is one when you see what has happened in Greece, what has happened last week, 2 weeks ago in Italy, how some president of the United States, not the present one, but some other before, have been re-elected. The fact that you have one time, but the second time what could be perceived as surprising. In France, if you look at what has happened during this term, this election, and what has happened during the previous term, the signals of the political governments, of their level of understanding of what happens in real economy and real enterprise has risen questions, to be cautious, has risen questions. And if you take, for example, the famous 75% income tax, which France has been sadly well known for, it's interesting because the economic analytics of this decision is that it should bring to the state roughly 200 million of euros. It's a tax whose revenue is supposed to be 200 million of euros, which means that everyone knows that the effect of this tax will be economically negative, because it's obvious that it will bring less than what it will destroy, which was exactly the case within the previous government about other decisions, where some decisions have been made knowing that they will have positive political effect toward voters, but negative effects toward the economy. And at this point, I think we are really passing through a crisis of democracy, which maybe can be linked to the mass media, because when the democracy has become a mediacracy, the result of that is that to be a candidate as a governor of California, you have to have a wealth which is more than $100 million because of the cost of the campaign. And today, statistically speaking, the various members of either the Senate or the House of the Representatives of the United States are spending more or less half of their time to do fundraising. Half of their working time. I think these belong to real crisis of democracy. The last point that I will mention as transition is the fabulous and ambivalent situation of your generation, of the youth. In many countries of the world, the proportion being different one to another, you have three categories of the youth. One is excluded category, which means people who are entering at your age within the world of adults, knowing that they are excluded for a number of years of the labor market. And today, the unemployment rate in France of the less than 25 years old is roughly 1/4 of the cohort. In Spain, it's one half. And if you don't have any degree in France, it's 1/2, which means that every year there is roughly 20% of the cohort of age which is entering in the world of adulthood, knowing that they have 50% of chance to be unemployed for years. This is a lasting social atomic bomb. So this is one part. Another part of the youth is anxious about unemployment and is usually compensating this anxiety by being frenetic consumers. They want to buy, they want to be well perceived with good brands and so on and so forth. And the last part, which varies from one country to another, and I know I am addressing this part, are people who have been educated enough, who have been developed enough to look at globalization as a fabulous opportunity, to look that they have leveraged tools and vast opportunities in this open world. And usually in your category, what we have seen during the last 5 years, in fact it is a 10 years, statistically it is a 10 years trend, but it has been increased during the last 5 years of the crisis, is that you are more and more demanding for meaning. And you are more and more demanding not only for money, not only for power, not only for recognition and so on, but you are more and more in your generation asking for meaning because you know that the world is at stake. You know that today natural resources are burnt out at 140% annually compared to what Earth is able to renew. You know that we are on a burning planet, and you know that your generation in 50 years from now will be accountable what has happened. And to finish, I think you are in a situation of fabulous opportunities, because many CEOs today, and with my gray hair and with my type of position, of course, I am meeting many persons. Many CEOs today are suffering, which is a good news. They are suffering of the ambivalent mission that they are receiving, which is often very short-termist mission of quarterly reports from their shareholders, while very long-term mission from the society, from the politician, and also from their employees. And these tensions between the two has to find ways to reconcile this tension. And the fact that it is clearly identified today, I think, is a very good sign to have your generation helping to reconcile that. And there is one very easy way, because we are on a Franco-British symposium, I will finish with that. There is a very simple way to reconcile that, which is just to remember Adam Smith. If your memory is awakened, the first book of Adam Smith was not Comparative Advantage of Nations. It was Theory of Moral Sentiments. And in the first paragraph of the first chapter of the first book of Adam Smith, which was posed on the table as an axiom, a mathematic principle, or an observation. For him it was an observation, but it was a basic grounding of the theory which after that was after. Don't forget that as an axiomatic principle on the beginning, Adam Smith was talking about the genuine and common share value among any people of altruism, compassion for others, and interest for common good. This is probably the kind of reconciliation that your generation, with the title of the symposium that you have chosen, will have to tackle. Good luck and all the best.